Hello and welcome to our Pisa and wine tasting vlog. It's day 5 of our itinerary, highlights of the Mediterranean on the Marella Voyager, and we are ported in Livorno from 7 AM until 7 PM.
Livorno is a great port. There's tons of excursions to choose from, including Pisa, Florence, Lucca, and even exploring Livorno itself.
We decided to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa for a few reasons.
With Rome the day before and Monaco and Barcelona after, we did want a bit more of a relaxed day without a full excursion, which put Florence out of the running for us.
We also thought Florence would make a lovely city break for a couple of days, and knew that there's not much around Pisa other than Miracle Square, so it just made sense to do this day on the cruise and Florence again at a later date, or a later cruise if we ever end up at Livorno again.
With this in mind, we originally booked Pisa on your own at £37 per person. This is a 4-hour excursion that gives 2 hours free time in Pisa.
However, before we travelled, we saw a post on the Marella Voyager Facebook group where someone had been on the Pisa and tasting excursion that day and said it was fantastic.
We researched this trip, which looked similar to the one we'd booked, except there was 1 hour free time in Miracle Square, and afterwards you travelled to a wine vineyard in the Tuscan Countryside to sample local wines and foods.
This was only £46 per person, so for an extra £10 each, it seemed like a no-brainer. We cancelled the original excursion and booked this one instead. Cancelling was simple to do on cruise control and was refunded in a couple of days. I believe you are free to cancel excursions until a couple of days before. It's great to have that flexibility.
And we definitely made the right decision as we had a great time on this excursion. We met at 8 AM just outside the ship for the short coach ride to Miracle Square.
So at first we are going to visit Pisa, so it's much better to visit Pisa in the morning than in the afternoon after wine tasting, because otherwise you will not see the Leaning Tower leaning, it will be straight. So that's why we decided to go at first to Pisa. One of the nicest places in our countryside, and we will have nice wine tasting with good wine. They produce everything at the farmhouse, so they don't breed there, so they produce everything there. Olive oil, white, red wine, so you will try the really good local wine of Tuscany. Then we will try, with Giovanni, we will try to collect all of you to bring back on the bus after the wine tasting. And as I mentioned before, about 1:30, half past 1, we should be back to Livorno.
On the drive, our tour guide gave us their telephone number in case of emergencies and lots of information about the local area. The Italian language evolved from the Tuscan dialect and developed when Dante wrote the Divine Comedy in Tuscan, and a mix of other dialects instead of Latin.
Florence and Pisa are connected to the port by man-made canals, and Tuscan marble was used to build buildings in Rome. They produce red, green and white coloured marble, including Carrara marble, which was used to create Michelangelo's famous David sculpture and in the Pantheon in Rome.
From the coach park, it's around a 15-minute walk to Miracle Square. The walk is flat and crosses a railway crossing. Other excursions do offer transport to Miracle Square on the trolley train seen here. There are lots of souvenir stalls and you need to be aware of pickpockets.
As you enter Miracle Square, you can see the baptistry, cathedral and of course the Leaning Tower. You can walk right up to each building and admire it close up, and the large lawns give a fabulous view from any spot on the square.
The Leaning Tower of Pisa took nearly 200 years to complete between 1172 and 1372. It survived earthquakes and world wars.
The tower leans because of unstable foundations and soft soil. The more floors that were constructed, the worse the lean became.
From 1990 until 2001, the tower was closed to the public, while a team of engineers worked to stabilise the tower as the lean had reached 5.5 degrees.
Over the years, there were many attempts to resolve the lean. They had built one side of the tower to be taller to compensate for the tilt, then added lead counterweights, but finally they resolved the tilt by removing soil from the raised side. We got our tourist photos holding the tower up and explored the square, but an hour was plenty of time to do this.
Visiting Miracle Square was amazing, well worth doing, and we loved learning the history of the tower. If you need the loo, you can pop to McDonald's and make a purchase and use your receipt to access the loos or pay a small fee of 70 cents.
We bought some macarons. I love looking at McDonald's menus abroad, although they weren't great, they kind of tasted like burgers. We had better in Rome.
We then met up with the rest of the group and walked back to the coach to head to the vineyard. On the drive, our guide told us about the wine production and the food in the region.
We arrived at the vineyard at 11:15. The vineyard was called Fattoria Il Poggio, though this isn't named on the excursion, so I can't be certain that everyone goes to the same one. They had the most gorgeous dogs. They were so friendly and said hello, but you could easily avoid them if you aren't a dog person. They were outside only, not indoors with the food.
We had a short tour of the vineyard where they grew grapes for wine and olives for olive oil. Their olive oil is cold pressed. The olives are picked and squeezed the same day. Cooking changes the flavour of the oil and it's pretty expensive, so it's not to be cooked, only to be served fresh to enjoy the flavour.
One tree usually makes 2 bottles. However, due to climate change, this year one tree is only producing a teacup. They said this was happening all over Italy and to expect prices to rise next year as a result.
We were then seated at 11:30. There were 2 bottles of red wine and 2 bottles of white wine. We were advised to try a small amount of each and then pour a glass of our favourite.
It honestly felt like being at a wedding, sitting at lovely long tables in a beautiful setting where bottles of wine and local foods were being passed around.
We had breads, olive oil, balsamic vinegar, sun-dried tomatoes, olives, meats, and later biscotti with dessert wine. It was all delicious.
I'm vegetarian, so just skip the meats, but there was plenty for me to eat.
And neither of us are huge wine drinkers. We don't often buy wine at home, but we really enjoyed everything that we tasted.
We also tried a dessert wine called Vin Santo. For this wine, the grapes are dried in a loft for months so the sugars become concentrated. This was served with biscotti that you dipped into the wine. It's in a regular water glass, not a wine glass, so it's easier to dip. I really enjoyed these.
There was plenty of wine left over when we left, as we physically couldn't drink it all. You could even buy bottles from the shop there. I wish I had now. My favourite was the Otium white wine.
The wine tasting wasn't guided. There was an info card describing each of the wines, but that was it. So it was a case of just trying and finding which one you like. It was nice to sit back and unwind in the countryside after such a busy day in Rome the previous day.
There was also plenty to chat about at the tables, as you can share what you did yesterday and what you got planned tomorrow, etc. We met a lovely couple, had a lot of fun chatting to them at the table and on the coach, and then later travelled into Livorno for a drink with them too, which was lovely.
The funniest part was that the coach in the morning was completely quiet, and the coach ride home after a few glasses of wine was full of laughter and chatter. It was a lovely atmosphere as everyone had made friends at the vineyard, and driving through the countryside was gorgeous too.
We left the vineyard at 12:40 and were back to the ship for around 2. We freshened up in the cabin and then hopped onto the shuttle bus to the centre of Livorno for £7 per person, which we paid on card. The shuttle is just outside the ship. There's a small gazebo and that's where you pay. It took around 10 minutes to get into Livorno. When you're ready to come back, the bus collects you from where it drops you off in town. Here is the drop-off pick-up point.
We arrived in town about 3 PM, although this was a bit of a mistake as everywhere seemed to be having their siesta. The town is quite small and really quiet. We had a wander around the canals of Little Venice and then had a couple of drinks at Bar Sol near the shuttle bus drop-off point. It was about €7 for a large draft beer or a cocktail.
We then got the shuttle back in plenty of time at 5:30. There were only 7 of us on the whole coach, so everyone must have been back early.
We had lots of sun and drinks this day and carried on all night. On the ship we ended up at the electric rooms and made our way down the cocktail list, even though we had an early alarm for Monaco the next morning.
Overall, we 100% recommend the Pisa and tasting excursion. It's said to be 4 hours, but we think it was more like 6, though we did still have time to go to Livorno afterwards too, so we packed a lot into that day.
It's been so nice looking back at our footage and putting this vlog together. We felt like we got the best of both worlds as we ticked Pisa off the bucket list and got to experience the vineyards too, and it was a slower pace on what is a very busy itinerary. We're definitely adding more of Tuscany and Florence to our bucket list.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and found it helpful, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe. Leave us a comment to let us know where you're heading in this port.